I just built a great career that looked amazing on the outside. All of a sudden, I am positioned as this brand expert, and I was sort of going through the motions and kind of building a company outwardly successfully. It turned into a whole lot of burnout and a whole lot of like looking in the mirror going, okay, this feels really good and I've checked all the boxes on the outside, but I don't know who I am. I feel like a shell and I'm at a breaking point. So I took a year off, and it was that time where I realized, oh, I'm just going to design myself. And that's really where Seeing Me was formalized, because it started to work. Then I knew, okay, this is an actual methodology I want to put in the world.
Welcome to the DesignRush podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Today we're sitting down with Ushi Patel, founder of Ushi Inc. and the creator of the Seeing Me method. She's flipped the script on personal branding, helping leaders connect to their true selves and transform their business identity from the inside out.
Everything that you do for a company's identity, you can do for one's own identity to help them get to where they want to get to. So that's the genesis of the method.
In 2024, where 80% of consumers are loyal to authentic brands and personal branding is essential for 82% of recruiters, Ushi's method couldn't be more relevant. She breaks down how aligning your personal and business identity is not just a game changer, but a necessity in today's market. From embracing your authenticity to understanding how AI is reshaping personal branding, Ushi's insights will leave you thinking deeply about what it means to design who you are. Got an exclusive story to share? Send it over to spotlight@designrush.com and let's make headlines together. Also, remember to like and subscribe to keep up with all of our future conversations with industry leaders. Let's dive in. Ushi, a very warm welcome to the DesignRush podcast. It is so wonderful having you here with us today.
Hi, nice to see you.
You too. Okay, so Ushi, I'm just going to jump right into the questions that I have for you, right? Because I cannot wait to pick your brain on some of this stuff. Now, first of all, I know that you've built quite the reputation for empowering people to create like authentic brand or personal brand experiences through your Seeing Me method. So first of all, I want to know, how did you first develop this method, and what were the initial challenges that you overcame in scaling that to a global audience?
Right. Well, we're going to go back to early 20s, maybe even when I was younger. So I grew up, and, you and I can totally talk family heritage and all that later. But to get to the point, I was an artist at heart, and my dad's like, there is no way artists make money, so you're going to business school. So it's like, okay. So all of a sudden, at a very young age, I was at the table for my ability to create, to think creatively, as well as from a business lens, business acumen. And what started to happen is that I just built a great career that looked amazing on the outside. And people would come to me, and there's like a lot of detail in there around, it doesn't just happen, but it sort of did, in the sense like referrals. And so all of a sudden I am positioned as this brand expert, brand consultant. Obviously, as a designer, I had a portfolio, so it's really easy to see my efficacy. So I'm not denying that, but I wasn't really in touch with any of my gifts or any of my talents. And I was sort of going through the motions and kind of building a company successfully, outwardly successfully, that everybody else thought I should build because of the questions they would ask. So it turned into a whole lot of burnout and a whole lot of like looking in the mirror going, okay, this feels really good and I've checked all the boxes on the outside, but I don't know who I am. Like I feel like a shell, and I'm at a breaking point. So I took a year off, and it was that time where I realized, oh, I'm just going to design myself. I'm just going to do the same things that I was doing for companies for myself. And that's really where Seeing Me was formalized, because it started to work. And we can talk about what work meant, but essentially I knew that if it worked for me, and if I started to try it with all the trust I had built in the relationships I had already had, then, and it started to work for them, and I had data points, then I knew, okay, this is an actual methodology I want to put in the world. So that's how it happened. And the way it scaled is that referrals, like people who used to use me for branding their jewelry shop, or started to write about me in more of like, they had now become like people in C-suite. They had become, heads of industry, things like that. They had, evolved in their own life. And so they said, well, why don't, you're a brander, why don't you help this person out? And I just started helping them out, quote unquote, using that method. And it turns out that everything that it's true, like everything that you do for a company's identity, you can do for one's own identity to help them get to where they want to get to. So that's the genesis of the method. And then there's a whole lot of in between. But that's and that's the short of it. The short of it is that it's based on something I did for myself that worked, and then applied it to others. And then when I knew it was working, it was like time to share it. And I do believe that when things are well designed, it doesn't take a whole lot of efforting to scale it. And I should also say, like, I am a blend of a lot of worlds. So in terms of understanding the language and how to connect with people all over the world, it felt like a natural extension for it to be global. But I also was coming from a place where I had already worked globally. So I had the connections and network already to be able to really have my doors opened, for
Absolutely.
the method.
Yeah. I mean, it's always wonderful to hear these kinds of personal stories. And I almost feel like a lot of the times when you do start a business or a methodology or anything such as what you've done, right? The best stories are the ones, and the most successful ones are when it comes from a really personal place, right? And when you've really done self-reflection, and I almost feel, this may be bold to say, but I almost feel the best ideas get started from that. And it's not just, oh, I want to start a personal branding business or consultancy or whatever, just because I feel like that's what's going to make me money right now, or that's the trendy thing to do. I actually feel like the way that you've done that is so much more impactful because you're actually coming to that with so much personal experience, right? So I feel like that's a very interesting thing to get into a little bit later, maybe. But yeah, it's very nice to hear that. So okay, you already had previous connections that helped you scale to a global audience, right? So I wonder, how did those connections really come to be? Were there any that really stood out to you initially, or someone you want to give a shout out to that really helped you in that phase?
Mm-hmm. There is a woman, Monica Silva Gutierrez, and she is a Googler. And one of the things that Google does super well, I mean, probably that's just an opinion, but I will say that from my perspective, one of the things that they do really well is the women of Google help each other out, right? Like they send emails, they have a way of communicating. And she was the one. She had a beautiful jewelry design company in San Francisco, and her career trajectory had her at Google. And at that time, there were women at Google who she was working with who were saying, like, I need to do something around my personal brand. So very naturally, she said, you should work with Ushi. And at the time, it was right. She said that like almost, I talk about seeing me being your 100th iteration. Like, you're going to iterate. You're a human being by design. You are iterative. So you can't ever say that you're something at a fixed point of time. It just doesn't, that's not natural. So I just say that because I was like on my 100th iteration of my own seeing me process for myself. So I had just come out of that thinking, okay, this is who I am today. This is my authentic now. And what I teach is that when you get to that place, you naturally draw in the opportunities for you. I couldn't have planned it. I didn't even ask her. And she just out of her own alignment to herself said, hey, you should work with Ushi. But of course, that's like, I'm so grateful that she did that. But that impulse, it's like, I don't know. I just feel like today everyone's like, oh, email people, send a blast. Like, they have all these marketing tactics. And I'm like, well, how about just be a human and connect? Because yeah, I mean, her and I had a relationship is the point, right? Everything that inspired her in that moment to write it was because of the lifetime value of a connection, right? And so that's really, she is generous for sure. And I will always give her a shout out for being generous and connecting the dots. I think that's probably one of her incredible zones of genius. But I also want to say that part of the environment that created that is that willingness to not market, so to speak, and to build relationships. Now, you know this, like some marketers, that's exactly what they think marketing is, and then there's the old marketing that's like blast one way, but that's what happened. And then it happened like 100 times with, I always say that people are like, oh, well, how big is your email list? I'm like, well, you should ask how big the lists are of the people who are on my email list. Because that's, would you rather have 10 million people in your email, or whatever, 1,000 people who know 1,000 people who know 1,000 people who trust 1,000 people? And that took me some time. I'll tell you that the Ushi prior to seeing me and that year off, she did chase that. And there is part of me that sometimes still chases that, right? But that's what seeing me is about. It's an alignment mechanism, so I can come back to my true north, and I can come back to my authentic now, my confident now, and say, okay, that is one way to do it, but the Ushi way is what Monica and I did together. And by the way, it's naturally reciprocal, because now in my mind, if I meet somebody, it's time to open the door for her. But I'm not trying. I'm not even planning. I can't even script how amazing that was. And also the ones that came through that door were so aligned to me, So that's kind of I like, people always call it Ushi magic. But I know magic's a hard word for some people, but that's what is behind the magic.
Hey, I think that's fine. Really, I think, at the end of the day, I think once you have that sort of word of mouth and you have that human connection with people and they're referring you to other people, I feel personally that that's quite a humbling experience to have. And it's lovely when people do that for you at the end of the day, and they always deserve a shout out for that kind of stuff as well. So just moving on a little bit, I know that you have like nearly 3 decades of experience across things like, technology, wellness, design, and stuff like that. So I do wonder, Ushi, what are the 5 ways that you identify and tap into market trends that really align with your clients' deeper values and goals when they're building a personal brand?
Right. So I it's a great question. And the reason that I take time to answer that is because it's more of the same answer. I think what happens is we start to tactic chase. And the reason that we tactic chase, which is very linear, is because, like, say, for example, I want more yeses, or I want, I want more eyeballs and I want more yeses. So we immediately go to tactics with people around more yeses, but we've missed the most important ingredient, which is who and why. And so the first thing to do, which is what the foundation of that's what the method is. It's the foundation that I tell everyone, go for it. Go hire that marketer, go hire that agency, go hire that consulting firm. But first do the Seeing Me method, because it sets the tone for who you are. And then everybody that you direct is also in alignment with that authentic now, right? So for some people, if they come and they want to, like, let's just say they build their Seeing Me board, which is it's like a vision board, and we can go into the details of that later. Let's say they build the Seeing Me board, and all of a sudden they are like, whoa, I'm seeing myself speaking, and I'm seeing myself not on actually stages, but in intimate environments. That's 2 different strategies. So the traditional approach, that person would probably have had 5 tactics firing away, getting them on stages, but not feeling that kind of fulfillment that they wanted, because their authentic alignment is in a small group. And there's like a lot of details to that. Maybe it's a small group in Bali and everyone's wearing yoga pants, or maybe that's really pushes somebody out, and no, it's a small group where it's a set table in a boardroom with gold pens. Like, we get to that level of granularity and detail around identity. And that's why I call it visually led, because I believe, like, when I can get with a client and I can see, like, okay, that's the thing that's moving them. Okay, great. Why? Tell me more. Tell me what's resonating. Tell me who's in the room. That gives me all the details I need to staff it up, so to speak, to get the agency side of services onto that. Like, the designer then knows, okay, this person is more retreat in Bali than corporate, or whatever that means, and I say whatever that means, but really the nuance of it is that it's identity is so hard, because I just said something like retreat in Bali, and the first thing that I had the perception of is a bunch of people with yoga pants on eating vegan food, which is like it's just probably going to crack everyone up who goes there. Because the truth is I've also known real estate investors to go there and have a more formalized experience of Bali. And so that's what I mean by that, right? Like, we get typecasted, we get labeled, and therefore we throw a bunch of tactics at that typecast and label, versus this is my authentic identity. What is it that I need to produce or staff or resource around that to get to market? So that's the, I think, first of all, that's why it's effective, but that's why people keep coming back, is because I'm never going to say it needs to be yellow because I said so, or it needs to be yellow because that's what the market wants, or college students like this color, so that's why you have to do it. There has to be room for them and for you, and what I like, the other, the universe, the what is ready to come through, the unveiling, right? There's three in the tango, not two, it turns out. so that's what's going down there. Yeah.
For someone also then looking to sort of follow in your footsteps, maybe not so much with your methodology, but more to pick your brain about being someone that is spearheading a creative and branding agency today, I do wonder, what would you say are the 4 most important steps for building a solid foundation rooted in that authenticity?
So part of it is I made a lot of mistakes. So I want anyone who is listening to know that if you feel like, whoa, I keep hitting my head against the wall, or I have these really erratic clients, like, that's where all this came from. So number 1, you do see me, and it's 2 parts. One part is you have to understand what makes your agency unique and important and vital. Why are you different from all other agencies? Why should people choose you over all other alternatives? It, industry speak is your value prop, but I like to call it, it's a little bit intimidating. So I always say, get in touch with your unique value and create a value statement. The other part is the Seeing Me board, and that board works for individuals but also companies. And if you have your team come in to creating their own Seeing Me board and the team or the company Seeing Me board, and you have the individual aligned to the collective, there's so much more creativity, there's so much more commitment, there's so much more cohesion, which is why, again, it's 2 parts, but that's the most important foundational 1 step, right? From there, it's the relationship, as we already talked about. So I would have a process or method for getting into conversation quickly with the kinds of people that you want to serve or that you see could benefit from your work. And as you astutely said, the spoiler alert of all of that, thousands of sessions, tells me that does lie in your lived experience or your personal experience. So you might own an agency and right now, I just do design for everyone. Well, if you're a single mom, why not do it for single moms? Or if, because who better to know the experience of who's sitting across the table from you, right? But get into conversation and really understand. And when I say conversation, don't send a survey. Don't do that. Right? I'm talking about like a real deal. Like, can I take you out to coffee? Can I talk to you about where your gaps are? Like, this is like with SEO people or ad people, they come to me and they're talking at me and I'm like, you don't even know what my business is. Like, what are you saying? You're just pitching a proposal, so get into conversation. And 3, it's the little things. Like, I started to implement like handwritten notes. I started to implement like lots of free trainings that went nowhere, so to speak. Like, I'm going to drop a ton of value for these people. I'm going to go, I think extra mile, so to speak. Like, that can get a little bit, in the world where we have so much to do, and me being like this high achieving, over giving, people pleasing person would always over give. But in hindsight, I'm kind of like, I'm glad I did it, because that bond was created because they knew I would be there for them. So the little things, like the little notes, the holiday gifts, the things that make them feel, to this day, people are like, that candle you sent me, Ushi. I was like, that was 10 years ago, right? This is a simple candle. I put some detailed thought to it. Like I knew that person liked the scent and everything, but still, like, it's a candle and she's remembering me 10 years later. So those are my, 3 to 4 that just work. And then of course the fourth is, it seems obvious, but I can't believe it's not obvious, which is come through. Like, come through, follow up, make sure they like it, and then share your work in a way that also uplifts them. Like, I am so proud to have empowered this person with our services because this is what that person's doing in the world. So now people they already see, you're not having to tell them anything, you're showing them who you are. So that's how I would tell anyone listening right now, structure your business that way, relationally versus transactionally.
Now, I know that you've worked with trauma sensitive mindfulness and bicycle software, like 2 pretty big brands, actually. So I do wonder, what are the strategies or techniques you use to attract such purpose-driven clients? And how really can smaller agencies stand out when they're competing for similar high-profile brands?
Yeah, you're gonna be like, this girl's a broken record. Referrals. Referrals. Look, if you the sort of cheeky answer is, if you are purpose driven, you will attract purpose driven people, right? If you're money driven, I have no problem with money driven people, but then you're going to attract money driven people. So what I say, or if you're money and purpose driven, you'll attract money or purpose driven. So it is getting clear about who you want across from the table. Now, secondly, in both those cases, they were referrals from people who I had come through. Again, referrals from people who I have known for a very long time. And they also have now referred many people to me as well. And so I can't, again, broken record, I can't emphasize enough, is like, you know, here's the thing about why a vision board is not what I call it. I call it a seeing me board, is because when you put a vision board up and you say, hey, I want to attract purpose-driven people, the missing piece of all vision boards, it is feeling, it is looking at it every day, it is making sure the actual visual is aligned and authentic to you. But you have to become the person in the vision board who has that life. That's identity. So you have to build your purpose-driven identity so that then you're at the coffee shop. That also happens to me a lot, by the way, is that if I'm in my aligned identity, I bump into that person at my kid's school, or I went to this Halloween party and don't want to go to the Halloween party, but somehow I'm here helping somebody because that's closer to my identity, and I met my husband. Like, you know, it's stuff like that it works. It sounds like, I think part of what made me shy away from that early on in my career, I wanted to tell people about my tactics, but I could see that's not helping people, right? It was really me becoming who I saw in that vision board. And by the way, purpose driven was very much a part of it. But the thing that switched in my vision board was I started to put people who, like, there's this one picture of Keira Knightley, and she's in Africa and she's holding a baby and she's talking to what looks like a UN rep, but she's holding the baby. And I was just moved by the image. So I popped it on my vision board. Do I want to be an actress? No. Do I even know if she's a nice person? Not really. Like, I don't know anything about her. I'm not saying that you emulate. I'm saying now get in resonance with it. And I remember telling the story of it. I was like, she's in her skin. She's really holding that baby. She really cares. And that's who those 2 CEOs are of those companies. David won't probably identify as a CEO. He's more of a teacher, but that's who they are. They are people who will pick up a child. They are people who have that kind of love and acumen to be in a conversation with somebody from the UN. Like Keira Knightley, she represents to me in that image a really trained, practiced, loves her craft person. That's what those 2 are. That's how you attract them. And it doesn't, in that scenario, even if you're just starting out, like, now what if I told you you need $500,000 to start an agency? You would stop. If you have a small agency and you just started, you don't need to do that. You just need to get really in touch with who you want to start showing up in your life.
I also want to ask, so For businesses that are looking, to hire a creative agency, I'm trying to like flip the script a little bit now here. What three tips would you give to ensure that they do find the right agency partner? What are the things that they need to be aware of in that process?
So everybody does the same method. I always say, don't hire anybody yet. You also have to know who you are, because I mean, for all of the designers or creatives, I'm a designer, so that's how I speak from my experience. How hard is it to serve a person who has no idea who they are? It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. It won't matter what you put in front of them. I don't like this curve. I don't like the da-da-da. And all of a sudden, your project is elongated and it's annoying. So I'm always like, if you're going to hire an agency, please, for the love of God, get clear. And you might, I say that with a lot of compassion. You don't know what you don't know. I get that. But if that's the case, then you go find somebody who has that embedded in part of their onboarding that helps you very clearly get clear about, precisely get clear about who you are and where you're headed and where you want to head and who you want to serve. If they're not asking those questions, what will happen is, like, again, in the case of design, you're going to get something pretty but not effective. You're going to get pretty, but something that doesn't actually move your business forward. So number one, get in, obviously I'm going to tell you it has to be seeing me, but get in some sort of process that helps you to gain that clarity and be able to very specifically articulate your value and what you're trying to do. That's one. Because otherwise the same thing will happen. You'll have an agency in your world who will tell you it's X number of dollars and they'll produce something and you'll go, shoot, I just spent 6 months of my life, all this money, all this time and resource, and the thing that's coming back isn't moving my business or company forward. I often meet people, I'm still like, again, that's why I never want to tell people like I've arrived anywhere. What I do have is a tool to keep going, okay, this doesn't feel right. Oh, from a business angle, my numbers don't look right. Come back home to yourself. And that's why even when you say manifestation, I often, it is what it is, but I don't love to use that word because I think it pushes business people out sometimes. So make no mistake, it's based in the principles of neuroscience and how our brains work and how we do create in the world. So there's that, but then there's also like, listen, oh, I'm looking at spreadsheets. I'm looking at the data. And if my data isn't looking like I want it to look, what do? The first thing I do is go get aligned, and then I come back to the data. Otherwise, you're just kind of angry that it's not working all the time, right? So you're totally shut off to that creativity. So it is manifestation, but I came at it from what works as a designer. And as a designer, I'm able to see what's out of harmony and bring it in, all the elements back into harmony. So that's the same thing that's happening with your strategies and the things that you're doing and the numbers that you're seeing is that I believe everyone can learn that way of being as a designer. That's why my whole thing is about dare to design the real you, because like people are told they're not creative. They're told, but it's actually part of who we are as humans to be able to do it if we have the tool, if we're willing.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wonder, what do you think, based on, not necessarily just the seeing me method, but also some other things that you might be seeing right now, excuse the pun there, but are the three biggest opportunities that you think are happening in personal branding and the creative space right now, or for creative agencies even, to grow in revenue and engagements and clients and everything in the next, say, year or two?
Yeah, I'm going to give you one because it's so big and it's so lucrative and it's so important and it's so now. And that is, you have to know how to help people put the them in the AI. So people there, you have one side who's like, AI sucks for creatives, and the other side is like, AI is amazing. And what I'm going to say to you is, jury's out. We don't know. But what we do know is that no matter what, people need to learn how to put themselves in the technology, and that's what's missing. So if you become an agency that knows how to help people put the them, their authentic them, so that everything doesn't look canned, that things don't look like jargony, that it's like, wow, that brand looks a lot like my brand. Like all of that. People want to be unique. They want to stand out, not because it's vain or arrogant, but because that's what it takes to have a successful business in the market. So the more, that's what I say. Like, this is why I'm always like, however you do it, of course, I'm going to tell you it's seeing me, but you got to be able to put the you in AI. You got to be able to put the you in tech. Otherwise, people will get lost, or they'll judge, or they'll just go somewhere else, or they just won't do it. They'll just quit. So I think companies that do that, agencies that do that, are going to really succeed. And don't just go and, oh, an AI workshop. Like, don't do that. Find people who can really, like, in a very human way, talk to them about what AI means for their business. Talk to them about what it means if their visuals are AI generated, or if their visuals are handcrafted by a designer or an illustrator. Talk to them about the benefit of it. Don't talk at them, talk with them. So hone in on that. How can you help them to stand out? How can you help them to understand this era that's already here, without judgment and without an opinion, but more with this attitude of how can we leverage it for them?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good one, actually, because people are struggling a lot. I use AI on a daily basis. I really do, whether it's for writing articles or whatever the case may be. But it's a process to try and get yourself reflected in there. And I do believe that we're going to get there soon. And I think that more and more companies are popping up that are trying to do that, make it more humanized and adding in the brand personality and everything. So I think definitely, but I agree with you. I think by next year we'll definitely be seeing stuff like that popping up a lot more. So finally, then, Ushi, the last thing that I would like to ask you is, you also looking into your future, and I just want to know, what is the growth strategy for Ushi Inc. at this point, and over the next, say, 5 years, and how do you plan to adapt to ongoing changes and just personal branding and creative industries and all that?
I love it. So most of the time I answer this and I say, oh, well, we'll see. I'm not a big 3 to 5 year planner kind of person, right? But I will say that the thing that's on my board, I'll share that, and sensing into that, is that I'm very interested in how this method applies to individuals who are in cultures that tend to just suppress, like, it sounds very blamey. It's a mutual thing, but they feel suppressed in a culture, and they're otherwise brilliant and creative and have a lot to give and want to give more. They know they're made for something more. I want to reach those people. So I've got a book coming out, and that only matters because at least then people could taste the method without necessarily having to do a deep dive, which is currently required, and then after they, kind of get that taste, then they're able to come into either a self-guided process or something around designing their identity. And then they're able to come into sort of a team process where that identity gets to be alive and radiant in a way that supports the company. So it's a very long way of telling you, like, I want to bring it to teams, and because those teams will touch a lot of people, and teams are not just in corporations. Teams are everywhere. They're in our communities. They're your family. And so that's the kind of imprint I want to have on the world, is that, like, I just feel like a sigh of relief, and being who you are isn't rolling. I say this all the time, like, it's not rolling into the boardroom in your purple yoga pants and being like, haha, here I am. It's knowing your authentic self, your authentic now, your authentic identity, moment to moment and context to context. When you get there, the amount of confidence that naturally comes out of you, which then contributes to you being able to make your signature mark, like, that's what I'm here for. So that's my next 3 to 5 years, if you want to call them that. I'm also the person who says that, and then some amazing opportunity comes, and I'm like, cool. That thing that I thought was 5 years away is here today. So we're going to respond, but that's what I'm feeling into. And that's what I'm super excited about. And there's a part of me that's like, obviously people are into it, but then there's also this part of me that's like, I had no idea it had that application, and I'm loving that kind of pleasant surprise. I say that because I get a lot of college students who are like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm like, okay, do seeing me, and it applies, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think it applies for most things. I mean, regardless of what you're trying to do in your life, I think knowing who you are at your core, or at least right now, I think it gets you through a lot of stuff, honestly. I think it's like I said to you earlier, I think that that's something that maybe everybody should go through regardless, right?
Yes. And
Seriously.
well, look, and who you are, I will tell you across the board from C-suite to college athlete, who you are is currently rendering based on shoulds, have tos, and right ways. It's currently rendering based on what people have told you about you, seeking external validation, somebody else's version of mom in the marketplace, right? We've been told that we're to this, to that our whole lives. And some of us are rebelling against it, some of us are reacting to it, but a little bit of eroding who you are bit by bit. So you have to come back to, how do I see myself? That's how they see me. And right, so you have to like take the layers of like, oh, I decided this is an example. Let me just make it more concrete.
Thank you so much for joining me and telling us all about this. Really, it was a fascinating conversation, and definitely a lot of it does make so much sense. I'm sure that our audience are going to find some value in this for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you. You were lovely to talk to. It's always nice, like you're on a podcast, but I think that I feel like I found a kindred spirit today. So thank you for that.
That makes me so happy to hear that. Thank you. If you want to hear more about how to stay true to yourself while leveling up your brand, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more DesignRush podcasts.